Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole. This year is starting off so well. I've had some of the most amazing guests, and the whole purpose of Dream Leapers is to inspire you to leap into your dreams. Well, what better guest can you have but someone who is doing it and doing it in such a fine way? So let me tell you about today's guest. He is James Monroe Iglehart. You've seen him on the stage. If you love Broadway, you've definitely seen him. He is a multi-award winning actor from stage and screen. He is a Broadway veteran with such credits as King Arthur in the Broadway revival of Monty Python's Spamalot. Did you see that one? Billy Flynn in Chicago, Hamilton in the dual roles of Marquis de Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson, and Freestyle Love Supreme. He is mostly known, however, for his Tony Award-winning role as Genie in Disney's Aladdin the Musical. Yeah, see, you know who it is. He has been seen on TV in shows like the Netflix series Maniac, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Elementary, Law & Order SVU, one of my faves, and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. He is an Emmy-nominated voice actor, lending his voice to many animated characters from Disney, Nickelodeon, DreamWorks, and Apple TV. And yet, his greatest joys are his beautiful grown children and his marriage for more than 20 years to his beautiful wife, Dawn. Please join me in welcoming James Monroe Iglehart.
Thank you for that. That was awesome.
And you know what? I know a lot about you, but when just right before we started and I heard your voice, I'm like, yeah, that voice. Okay, when did you know that you had this voice?
Funny. This particular voice happened when I was in my teens, and I sound like my dad. My dad was an actor in the 70s. He stopped acting around, right after when I was around 4 years old. But he had that voice, and it was wonderful and nice. I'm not stroking my own ego. It's just he had a great voice. But the fun part was, he also had that voice that when you were in trouble, you knew you were in trouble. That deepness that did rumble through your whole spine. And I remember one day, I always tease people because hate's a strong word, but I don't like to be called Jim. And my father was in business, and in business they shorten people's names, and so
that's a code way of describing it. Yes.
So someone called the house, and I answered the phone, and they thought I was my father. And they were like, "Hi, is Jim there?" And I said, "No, but James is." And this hand came from out of nowhere. I was like, he's like, hello, yes, this is Jim. And to this day, I tease my dad about that. Because he said, "I didn't mean to hit you. It was just a quick reflex. Like, get off the phone." But I learned I had his voice then, because people kept calling and saying, "Oh, hey, Jim." I'm like, no, that's my dad. And so I'm very proud of it.
It just the difference between the male and female being. Your voice has changed. I mean, our voices changed too, but not in the same kind of a way.
Yeah.
But at that pivot point of being a teenager when everything is upside down anyway, and you're like, oh, what else?
Yeah.
And then the voice starts cracking and you have no idea what it's going to merge into.
I was so upset. I was a tenor, and like I mean, as a kid, and I could hit these high notes. I was a big Prince fan, and I could hit these high notes. And one day, my voice changed, and I started crying to my mom. I mean, literally in tears, telling her I didn't want to be a bass because there was nobody in the late 80s, early 90s that was a bass, and I was so upset. But then my mom passed me. She said, "You love Motown 25. I said, "Yes, I do," because Michael Jackson did the moonwalk and everything. She said, "Watch it again." And I watch it again, and I see Melvin from The Temptations.
Yes.
And I hear him sing, and I was like, that's pretty cool. And around the same time as my voice changed, Take 6 came out. And so I got to hear Alvin Chia, the bass. And then, of course, then Boyz II Men came out, and Michael was there. And I ended up settling as a bari tenor. So I'm a baritone tenor. So plus in the gospel church, there's basses, but really it's just like, soprano, alto, tenor, and maybe a bass. So if you're in the gospel church, you just sing tenor regardless, whatever. So it always kind of kills me. So I do have higher notes. So I'm a buried tenor because of my gospel training. So it's been really fun. So sing like my mom, but talk like my dad.
I love that. And I also love that the greats from the Temptations all the way to more contemporary artists really became examples for you.
Yeah, because it let me know that there was more than one way to do something. It let me know there was more than one way to sing. And in something as simple as that, it also helped me with my life choices to let me know that there was no singular path to get to someplace. You don't have to be just like this person to get to a certain level. You can do it your own way or make a different way of doing things. So I started looking at like the pantheon of singers. I started looking at, guys like who I loved Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, but I also started looking at guys like Johnny Hart. And when you look at guys like Johnny Hart, like a black dude who is a crooner, or you start looking at, Johnny Mathis or Nat King Cole, you start looking at the black crooners, that's a whole different thing. And you were like, wait a minute. So I started bringing songs to my high school that nobody was singing. I was like, okay, if I could do that, I'll never forget bringing, Billy Preston's I'm Born Again. Come bring me your softness. That
Oh,
song. And
yeah.
boy, I brought that to high school and the girls were like, what song is that? And I was like, oh, something my father, I found something at home, So I said, since all the boys are singing one thing, let me sing something different.
That
And
was
so it
smart.
really kind of
And
opened.
you know what that points to is history, knowing your history, doing research so that
Yeah.
you can learn. Because my daughter in her first year of college, she's a junior now, she took a Black music course. And I think she thought she knew a whole bunch about Black music, which she did. But then this was the deep dive, and there were so many artists, some of whom I didn't know either. And so she's bringing home information. So, did you know about this one or that one? And the sounds, and then how this sound from maybe the 40s has influenced something in
Oh yeah.
thousands and the 2020s even, which is really powerful. You mentioned Alvin Chia. This is just how small the world is. So I met Alvin and the group Take Six in the 90s at a meditation retreat, okay? Where
Wow.
they were performing and we liked each other, the whole group, we really connected. I think it's his sister who I really connected with. Fast forward just a few years ago, his daughter worked for me for 3 years. This is how the world. So my mother says, "You
Yeah.
always gotta treat people right because you never
True.
know."
You never know.
No, and a wonderful young woman, her name is Brax Chia, and she worked with me right as we were in the pandemic and kind of climbing out. So the
Yeah.
world is that big that
Very
just
small. One of the things I learned early in my career, because I was in the Bay Area. I'm from California. I'm from Hayward,
right?
California, and people would say, always treat people right because your reputation definitely goes before you very quickly,
Yeah.
and people in New York will hear about you in the Bay before you even get there. Because actors would come to New York and act in the Bay, and I would be like understudying them. So they'd always bring some New York person to be in a show to star, and then all the
Right.
Bay Area people would be the understudies. That's a whole different story. and but I
Yeah,
learned. But what's funny is like your reputation. If you don't treat people right, by the time you got to New York, folks already knew if they wanted to work with you or not. So I always tried to be as professional and businesslike, and also, not kiss butt, but just like, just be nice.
of course.
There's nothing wrong with being nice, knowing who you are, but being nice at the same time.
Yes, graciousness is underrated.
Very much so. Very much so.
When did you know I am to be a performer? This is my calling.
I think I was about maybe 5 or 6.
I love it.
Kid you not.
What happened? Do you have a story?
Yeah, my mom sang in church every Sunday. My mother sang in church every Sunday. And my mother basically, she knew I could sing a little bit, but, she didn't really know I could sing. But I had a teacher named Mrs. Dopart, who I will love forever. I went to a Christian school. The school was at the church. And she was going to do this big presentation. and she said she was going to give me a solo. And I remember I was a little nervous, and she said, "Who are your heroes?" This is so ridiculous, but I said, "Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck." And she said, "Really?" And so I knew I had memorized all these cartoons. And so I did, in order to keep me from talking too much in class, she would let me have the last 10 minutes of class to like entertain the class with my memorization of the Looney Tune cartoons. And I would go back and forth from the what's opera doc. And I mean, to this day, I still know them. And I would do that. And so she gave me this solo. And I remember singing in front of the audience. And the funny thing about it was it was called Bullfrogs and Butterflies. They've both been born again. So it was about the fact that a frog is a tadpole, but then turns into a frog, kind of like when God touches you, you're born again, into something else. And there was this guy at our church named Carl Duncan, who was always trying to imitate the Reverend James Cleveland. And he was always growling. And so I thought I would put my growl into this part. So I growled the first time on that microphone that night, and the people started clapping. And I tell you, the first moment I heard applause, I knew this is it. This is what I want to hear for the rest of my life. I want to hear those hands clapping for the rest of my life. And from that moment on, from that solo on to now, I am 50. That is all I've been chasing.
Love it. And how supportive was your family?
Extremely supportive. Way too supportive, way too honest about it, because my mom is a singer and my dad is an actor. So where most people go, "Hey, it's going to be really hard, and you may not want to do it," or they'll go, "Sure, you could do anything." They were just honest. They were like, "Look, if you're going to do this, just know you're going to hear no more than you hear yes. You got to practice." I'd be singing in the car, just singing in the car. My mom's like, "Stop singing in your nose, sing from your diaphragm." I'm like, "Can I just sing a song? Why are you?" Dad teach, I'm trying to do a monologue. He's like, can you stop? And I'm like, can a brother just play as a child? No, they were training me without they were training me without training me. So they were very honest, very supportive. And in my family, you were either in sports or entertainment. So my brothers, my cousins, there was football players, baseball players, and then there was the dancers and singers. So there was kind of like, that was the thing.
Wow, that's so interesting. So I would say I'm a writer first. And I remember with my daughter, I mean, always teaching grammar, always teaching, just always. And editing whatever she's writing. And there were plenty of times she's like, "Mommy, please, can you just please stop?" And then in high school, she told me one time, she said, "There are 3 of us who have parents who are editors and writers. And we are the only ones whose parents didn't have to hire writing coaches for us to write our essays." And she said, we're grateful because you all are always teaching us every second. I was so happy to hear this because, she was not saying thank you before.
Let me tell you something. I had a person I thought was a horrible teacher. I thought she was the meanest woman. Her name is Miss Lipsky. I thought she was the most terrible person in the world, because every week we had to do a book report and we had to write a full 3-paragraph essay. We were in 5th and 6th grade. I was like, what is wrong with you? And actually, no, every month we had to do a book report, and every week we had to do current affairs. So we had to go and read a piece of paper, cut it out of the newspaper, and then write a 3-paragraph essay about this. And my mom thought, she was like, "Oh my God, that's just way too much homework for you." Then I got to high school.
Yes.
And I was one of the only kids, especially being a Black kid, that could write a full-on report, like 5-page report. I mean, where you have to do, what's your main idea, what's your subject, what's your conclusion, and do all that. Well, I got there, and I mean, those teachers looked at me like I was some alien, because they were looking at the white kids like, why is this Black kid? No, it was this moment of, how do you know this already? It's like, so what's the first part? Well, that's the main idea, it's the topic sentence. And I knew they looked at me like something was wrong. So then they blamed it on the fact that my mom was a teacher. My mom was a music teacher. I was like, yes, that's true. It was my mom, and my dad is a writer, but that wasn't why. It was because of this teacher. And I did go back. I went back. I went back and I said, "Listen, I want to forgive me for all the grief I gave you, because I got to high school and these kids, they don't." They don't know one sense from another.
That's beautiful. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. Hey guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole, and we have the distinct honor right now of talking with James Monroe Iglehart. He is a Broadway veteran. He's on Broadway right now. and so let's talk about this story of Louis Armstrong.
Yes.
And so I grew up in Baltimore. My father loved listening to jazz. He had his quadraphonic sound, in the basement and these speakers are everywhere, and he would play his records, and everything was so precise. And for sure, Louis Armstrong was one of those sounds.
Yeah.
This production was such a surprise to me because first of all, I didn't know much about Louis Armstrong's life, and it's told through the women of his life. So talk about the story, and what did you know about him as you were being invited to do this role?
Well, actually, the funny thing is how I got a part of it was I contacted my people to contact them. Because what happened was it was during the pandemic when everybody was trying to figure out what to watch.
Right.
Like we're at home, guess we're gonna watch something. And finally, I convinced my wife to watch Ken Burns Jazz and the documentary. And the first 3 episodes really were about Louis Armstrong and how he kind of didn't create jazz, but kind of put it on his back and became like the cornerstone star of what jazz was going to be for America. And I just thought that was the most interesting thing I'd ever seen. I was like, this is an American icon, and why he's a musician. This leans itself into a Broadway musical. This is just right here. And then I found out someone was doing the musical, and so I had my representation contact them and tell them I was interested in being a part of it in any way I could. And I didn't know much about him until the documentary. So once I learned that part, then I just went crazy. I just started reading everything and started finding everything. So by the time I actually met with the powers that be at A Wonderful World, the Louis Armstrong musical, I had this wealth of knowledge as well. I was like, so what about this? Why do we do this? Why do we do? They were like, oh, you actually know. I was like, yes, I have studied. If I'm gonna be a part of this, I want to make sure we get this man's story out. So I didn't know much until I watched the documentary, and then from there I just started, the internet's a great place. I always go, what did we do before it?
You know what? You're saying something that I think is so important, and that I say to my clients all the time. You have to do your research.
Oh, got to. You have to.
You have to do your research. You don't walk into a situation without having some knowledge about it. And what you're describing is so important. And of course, it allows you to bring such a much richer story to the story. Right now, I'm hearing you correct me. I've always heard him called Louis Armstrong. Is that not correct?
It is correct, but it goes back to my first joke at the beginning of our interview about people shortening people's names.
James
so
and Jim.
I try to bring it around circle. If you listen, Louis called himself Louis. Like if you listen to Hello Dolly, he says, this is Louis Dolly. He always says Louis. And he called himself Louis Armstrong. Now, yes, he's from New Orleans, or New Orleans, as he likes to say, and it's full of, Black and French and Creole. So some people called him Louis, but he liked to be called Louis. But then he got to the white culture, and they were like, "Hey, Louis," and it was like, "Oh, fine," and he was like, "Whatever." So, and two of his wives loved to call him Louis as a nickname, but he called himself Louis. So he is both Louis and Louis Armstrong. But it is kind of funny that when you listen to whether it's Bing Crosby, whether it's Daddy Kaye, whether it's Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, all of them called him Louis, but the brothers called him Louis, and it's so.
I love that. I love getting the inside scoop. So that was a good one. There were many things about the performance that I thought showed a window into a world that many people don't know. One of them being, if you are fortunate enough to be a working performer, you have to be on the road. The way that they made money, it was to travel and go to different places in order to perform. which can be very difficult on your personal life.
Yes.
And I think it was a little bit of a shock to hear he had 4 wives, but then when you go into the story and you just see it's a tough and lonely life.
Yeah.
And I think you portrayed that with an elegance, so we don't end up thinking he's a dirty dog. We just
Yeah.
end up seeing he's trying to live his life. Can you talk about that part of his humanity and what you were bringing forth?
I think the thing that people don't understand is like it wasn't until the 1980s within the Reagan era where all of a sudden there was 2 moments. It was the 1950s and then the Reagan era where all of a sudden there was this ultra conservative Christian way of your marriage must be this, no matter what happens, you must stay, no matter how bad the woman is treated, she must just deal with it. And she must just realize that God wants her to be there with her man. Well, back in the 20s and 30s, these people, no disrespect to your audience, they were some freaky people. They had a whole the Roaring Twenties is called Roaring Twenties for a whole different reason.
Okay.
These folks had a whole different life. So people, the lifestyle that these people had was a little freer than what we were taught when we were kids. And so for Louis, he learned that there were certain decisions that he made that he was like, oh, this may have not worked. So his first marriage, they were young. They were teenagers, and they realized, oh, this was not our smartest move. And then the second one, he kind of realized that he knew he made a mistake, not in marrying her, but in leaving her, because back then the man was in charge. It was the 30s and 40s, and Lil Hardin was a very strong woman, and she was in charge of his band, and the guys around him were saying, man, you henpecked, you'll let your woman be in charge of the band, this and that. And he wanted to be free. And she made a statement. She stood strong on her beliefs. And she said, listen, you can, but I'm not going to do that with you. I'm not going to be doing all this mess with you. So I'm going to stand. He was like, well, I got to go. And she was like, you know what? You do have to go, and it's okay. And they stayed friends. They stayed friends forever. And then he had one of those, like men do, have one of those midlife crises where I'll date somebody young. And he was like, this was stupid. And and then she left him for his drummer, which is always a fun story for me. And funny, Louis laughed about it. Louis got on the radio and was like, yeah, I'm glad she gone. He's somebody else's problem now. Because she knew, he was like, this was a bad decision. And then he, as every person does, you really find out who you truly are and you get mature. And he married Lucille. And that's when he realized what a real relationship was. And as far as playing it that way, you have to play it as someone who accepts their decisions. Sorry, my cat is scratching the door. Stop it! I have 2 cats, and they're like, Daddy's in there.
Come in.
Yeah. And when he married Lucille, it was one of those moments of like, now it's time to be a grown person, And so I try to play him with the dignity of each of those moments in your life. And it really is, our show is about the choices you make, and you have to be okay with those choices. And I think as an older man, he looked back and said, yeah, I made some interesting choices, but I stand by them. He didn't try to hide them. He didn't try to say, hey, nowadays we always try to make some excuses. Somebody else. No, back then you had to just own it. And I love that Louis was able to own it. And so I decided that the way to play it was just straightforward. Let's not sugarcoat it and just say, these are the things that he did. Also, I learned back in those days, everybody had like 4 or 5 husbands. Like you look at like Elizabeth Taylor, all these people, though, especially if you were in the business, folks got married for the dingiest reasons. It's like, oh yes, I love you. Oh wait, I don't really know who you are. And I think there's something that most people don't know about the entertainment industry. When you meet someone while you're doing a show or while you're doing a project, you get to meet their representative.
Yes.
And the fun part is you do these very intense scenes and you feel like you know them. And there's this, I don't want to get too deep, but there is this sexual energy between you two. And it's so palpable that you end up doing something. But then when the show is over or the project's over or the concert's over or the tour is over, there's no show. It's just the 2 of you. And then you realize, oh no, I don't know you at all. I don't know that you leave the dishes in the sink. I don't know that you don't ever pick up your clothes. I don't know you have to sleep on the left side of the bed. We are not compatible at all. I had no idea your mother-in-law comes with you every city you go to. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So these people, yeah, I looked over history just to make sure that Louis wasn't crazy, and I was like, nah, it wasn't. It was just the time, it was just the time.
Fascinating. And also in this production, you get a glimpse at racism and
Oh yeah.
what his experiences were at that time as an incredibly talented Black man.
The
So
fun,
about
the
that.
the interesting thing about this and Lewis's time is you have to realize that this is before civil rights. This is before the marches. This is before the sit-ins. People just had to deal with it, and you had to navigate your way through the racism. And because he was on tour, whatever city he was in, it all depended on what was going on. But I will say Lewis did stand his ground. There were certain places he wouldn't play. He was like, nah, if you don't let us in, I'm not playing that place. And people were shocked, oh, why won't you play? And Lewis always got this reputation for being, especially with Black folks, this Uncle Tom like smiling character who always smiled for the white folks. What you didn't know was that Lewis, and one of my favorite things is there's this great documentary called Black and Blue on Apple TV about Louis Armstrong. It's fantastic. And Lewis said, they said, why didn't you march in the civil rights movement? You, from the time you started your career, you always smiled at the white people. He said, I didn't march because this is my bread and butter. If I marched and someone threw a bottle and it hit me in the mouth, then I can't play. And if I can't play, I can't make money. And if I can't make money, I can't give money to the cause. He gave money to the cause and never said a word. He said, you don't have to tell nobody I did it. You don't have to tell nobody I gave any money. Martin Luther King and all those wonderful greats, they, especially on today, they all knew that Louis Armstrong gave money and he had a lot, but he didn't say anything. Louis didn't say anything until Little Rock, when he just couldn't keep his mouth closed anymore. He couldn't do it. And when he said that, that's when everything went haywire. But he stood his ground again. Black people talked about him like he had a tail. And then when he criticized the president, he thought that the Black people would be there to back him up because they had been waiting for him to say something, and they were like, "Well, we want you to talk about racism, but don't talk about the government. That's different." So the white people left him, and the Black people left him, and then Lewis he didn't become a hard man, but his whole view of the world changed, and it was very interesting of how he looked at Black folks and how he looked at white folks. I can't hear you now. Uh-oh.
For people who may not understand Little Rock, because folks don't always know history, frame that up a little bit so that they know what you're talking about.
The Little Rock was the Little Rock Nine. So there were 9 students who were trying to go to the school, and the president said that they could, but the governor of that wonderful place said they could not, and sent the army out to block them, and told the people to make sure they couldn't go. So the president had to put the army out so they can get into school. So while the army, just imagine the army is lined up, just imagine a Soul Train line, but it's not positive. So the army is lined up, the Black kids are walking through, and all these, horrible, horrible people are throwing bottles that are filled with water and urine and beer and books, and they're throwing them at these kids, throwing them at children trying to go to school. And Lewis sees this, and he's supposed to go to Russia to represent the United States. There's a whole video of him on the tarmac, and they said, are you going to go to Russia and talk? And Lewis said, I can't go until they fix that down there. And I mean, really put it to rest. If they don't, then I can't do it. And then another interview happens where he finally just says, what we say in the show is quite tame to what Lewis said. Lewis had a very foul mouth, both he and his beautiful wife. And I think it's always funny when I hear that, because most people hear Lewis, talking all nice and sweet and smiling. Nah, Lewis was one of the realest brothers in the world. And what he said was that word, person, could go to hell. And he felt that Ike was a coward for not stepping in. And what I found so interesting was that, I don't know if any of your audience remembers when Laura Ingraham told, told LeBron. He said LeBron to shut up and dribble. She said,
yeah.
Well, there is an actual article, you can find it, that says this one particular writer wrote, Louis should shut up and play. And I thought, that's crazy that we have changed but not changed. Louis spoke out about Little Rock, and all of these papers turned on him. They said Louis should be happy with the money he's made from America. How dare he criticize America after everything we've given him? It's like this man played his butt off, trained, worked, and to get his music to where it is so that you would enjoy his music, but he owes you something? So he couldn't take it anymore. And he said something, but then it was interesting because when the white folks turned on him, the black folks turned on him too, because they were like, well, we can't protect you with the government's involved. And he was like, you guys have talked about me for years, and now I say something. So, but his history is colorful.
Yes.
In his ways. But he always looked at it and said, listen, it's about love. It's about the music and the love. And I will not stop loving people. He goes, I always look at people and look at who real people are. I know who you are because I've never changed. And if you look at Lewis's history, the people say, oh, he smiled at the white folks. He performed like that when he was in his 20s. This is just who he was. That was his way he performed. He never changed his performance. He said, some interview asked him, would you change your style? He goes, what is style? He said, good music is good music. He goes, there is no style. He goes, if you like it, you like it. He goes, I'm not going to change up my style to be something different. If you like my music is music. A note is any language. So it was always interesting to see how true he stayed to himself. It was the world that changed, but he always stayed the same. And so if you do that, people love you. You live long enough for people to hate you, and then you live long enough for people to love you again by the time you're old. So
great. Hey guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole. We're talking with James Monroe Iglehart. He plays Louis Armstrong on Broadway. Where is the performance?
The performance is at the beautiful Studio 54 on 54th Street in Broadway. It's fantastic.
So for those of you who didn't get to go to Studio 54 when it was the place to be, it's still the place to be in a different way right now. It's a beautiful theater.
It's wonderful and has so much history. Just walking around the place, you can just there's an energy in Studio 54 where you're like, oh yeah, you could tell crazy stuff happened up in here. And it was a perfect place for Louis because that place before it was Studio 54, I believe I have my history right, was also one of the CBS studios. And when it was a TV studio, and Louis did perform there. So it was fun to like have that spirit as well of like, all those different TV shows that were there, and that Louis was also there at that building.
So I want to talk about you as the genie in Aladdin. I think you've done a lot of work, but you won the Tony for that. And I just remember your face on every bus, every billboard, you were ubiquitous.
Yeah.
And such a big personality that you brought into this role. And you mentioned earlier in this interview about those early years of the cartoon characters and really embodying them. I'm wondering, did that have some influence on you being able to control?
Oh yeah, I have been an animation fan since I was a child. And it's one of my favorite things to do now. Now that I get to do animation, I'm so happy. I light up every time I get behind the microphone and just start doing the weirdest voices and saying the stupidest things. I have the best time.
Love it.
But Genie was he still is. I have two favorite Disney characters, and it's Goofy and Genie. And I remember seeing the movie when I was 17. And I was a big Robin Williams fan. I love stand-up comedy. And my mom took me to see it. And I literally leaned over to her after Friend Like Me and said, I wish I could do something like that one day, never realizing that I was pretty much manifesting it in real life, putting it out there to do it. And then when I got married, my wife and I would go to Disneyland, and they had something called the Aladdin Spectacular. It was a 45-minute show. And I would go there and people would say, hey, you want to be in that? I was like, yeah, but I want to play Genie. And they'll never let a black guy play Genie. Every audition they had black guys auditioning for Jafar. And I was like, I don't want to play Jafar. I know what I should play.
So you already knew this was not like you didn't stumble into this role at all.
what happened was I was doing the show called Memphis, which I love so much. And there was an advertisement on Broadway.com that said the Fifth Avenue in Seattle was doing Aladdin. And I had just finished doing a show at the Fifth Avenue. We did Memphis there, our out of town tryout before we went to Broadway. So I called the Fifth Avenue and said, how do I get an audition? How do I do this? I looked at my wife, I was like, it's Genie, baby. Finally, someone's doing it. I need to. Also, I had auditioned for Lion King like 50,000 times. And, it's one of those moments where it finally hits you that the saying that just because a door closes does not mean another door is not there for you.
Right.
I wanted to work for Disney all my life, and it wasn't for me to be in Lion King. The door opened for Aladdin.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a friend of mine was playing. He was the one that was playing the auditions. And I said, is anybody improving? Is anybody making up stuff? He was like, no, everybody's reading straight from the script. And I thought to myself, doesn't anybody know this character? This is Robin Williams. Half of what he said in the movie was not written down. And
Right.
I love improv. It's one of my favorite things to do. I'm a part of Freestyle Love Supreme, which is a hip hop improv group.
I love
And people send us words and we rap, we make up raps on the spot for you right there. That's what we do. And so I went into, you're not supposed to do this in auditions. I'm telling you here, you're not supposed to do this. My wife said, you are absolutely insane. I wrote my own lines. I started remaking my own lines and my own jokes in between the lines that they had written. And I went into that audition and I did that. I just started saying their lines, but saying my own jokes. And that poor reader who was with me was lost, had no idea where I was. I would always come back to the cue line for them to say something, but I wanted to show them this is what Genie should be. And I said, they're either going to love me or they're going to hate me. And lo and behold, they were like, this crazy guy who had the nerve to walk in here to write his own stuff. And then after the audition, I was talking to my friend, not realizing that the director was behind the counter. I thought it was just some casting person. So my friend said, how'd the show go last night? I said, oh man, the set broke. He said, what happened? I said, well, they gave me a mic like they usually do. And I went out there and just improv to the audience until they fixed the set. And the director goes, you did what? I said, yeah, I just went out there and started doing crowd work. I love crowd work. I take a script with me. That's what I love to do. And he was like, really? So next thing I know, I get a call that I got a call back. And then I realized that's the director. And he goes, I want you to go in there and do exactly what you did with me. And he goes, by the way, you auditioned for 2 people. When you go in, there's 30. Half of Disney's there and half of the Fifth Avenue. So I walked in there and it was a small concert. And when I tell you, I went in, I did a cartwheel. I was jumping all around. I was making up stuff. And this time the reader was ready. He was like, this fool was going to just say anything. So let me just wait, So, and those cartoons, that moment, the animation is free to do things you can't do in real life. And I thought, this is my one shot, so I might as well take it. And the rest is history.
That is exciting. It's truly following your heart, but also being prepared. I mean, you need the character.
Yes. And, I knew. Yeah, you have. I think the thing about it is the best way to be ready for things is to have a dream and to have the energy and to have the love, but preparation.
Yes.
You've got to be prepared, and you got to be prepared for things that you're not thinking about. Because anything can happen. So be prepared with all the material they give you, but be prepared with something of your own just in case. You never know what they may ask you to do, and so I always try to be prepared with my own stuff, but also what they've given me to let them know, hey, you can also pivot to this too and go back and forth and be ready.
That's beautiful. You have given me a fresh, much more positive perspective on Disney. Now, I mean, I love Disney, but going to Disneyland, going to Disney World, okay, whatever. I'm not that girl, right? And my daughter is now semester abroad in Paris.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for her. I'm
living
vicariously through her. But one of her friends who is also on the semester abroad, the whole family came to bring him. I came with my daughter. This whole family came, and they all went to Disney in Paris. Like that was like, we all are going to Disney in Paris. And I'm thinking, why? I mean, nothing against Disney, but why are you going to Paris and going to Disney? They were so excited. And listening to you, I get it.
Like, I went to Disney Paris. I went to Disney Paris. It was fantastic. My goal is to hit every Disney park there is, and I've hit Disneyland, Disney World, I know, and now Disney Paris. So there's 3 more to go to. And I think the thing about it is there is our folks, and rightly so, have a convoluted history with Disney, and I thoroughly understand that. But it's kind of like the Constitution to me. The dream of the Constitution and the reality are two totally different things. So the dream of what Disney says, that every kid is a prince and a princess or a hero, whether no matter what, or a genie or something magical, that's what I deal with. And you made the rules. So don't be mad when I play in those rules and I make something of my own that is great. You set up the rules, sir. Just because you're dead and gone does not mean other people cannot create it. So when I stepped into the role of Disney, when I stepped in the role of Genie that was previously created by this wonderful, amazing white comedian, I did my research because the story of Aladdin it was told when Scheherazade tells the story. She tells the story, it's not in the Middle East. She's Middle Eastern, but she tells the story of this place in the Orient. So it's in the Orient, but the genies, most of the time, were black because they were slaves.
Ooh.
So if you watch the movie The Thief of Baghdad, there's this wonderful actor. I always forget his last name. His name is Rex. He was one of the he played the devil's son in Cabin in the Sky, the musical, one of my favorites.
Wow.
But he played the genie. So the first genie on film really was this black man. And when Howard Ashman and Alan Menken wrote the music for Walt Disney's Aladdin, their envision was that he was supposed to be a Cab Calloway, Fats Waller type of character. But then Howard passed away. And so one of the other animators said, wouldn't it be funny if we had Robin Williams? But if you listen to the music of the movie, all of Genie's music is big band music. And then they go into Broadway. So all of Genie's music is black. So when they went to Alan and said, we want to do it on stage, Alan said, I think we need a black genie because that's how we wrote it. And then Casey said, our director, Casey Nicholas, said, there's no way we're going to have blonde, blue-eyed people in Agrabah because there were no white people there in the Middle East. So that's why our show was brown. So it all depends on your interpretation. You can look at Disney one way, and I always have this argument with folks. I won't get too deep into it, but we always go into this moment of like, yo, man, the Crows and Dumbo, man, Jim Crow. I'm like, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right, and that is wrong. But what is one of our favorite black films? The Wiz. Look at the Crows in The Wiz, and look at the Crows in Dumbo. They're almost dressed exactly alike. And Berry Gordy looked at it and didn't say a doggone word. And we never, ever criticized that movie. And so when folks come to me and say that, I go, yes, you're right. But there are a lot of things that we took. Disney said one thing and we looked at them and said, yeah, great, that's beautiful. But we about to take it back. And who's your favorite king in Disney? It's Mufasa, and that's a black dude.
That's true.
So I always look at Disney like, sure, you can have a bad reputation, but don't mess up if you give it to America. Once you give it to us, we can take it, baby, and run with it. And we have.
I'm glad I asked you that. That's so good. Okay, we have just a few minutes left, but sure. I must talk to you about family.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, when you speak of your families with that big smile on your face, and you know, you are a performer, you are on the road. This life is not the easiest life.
No.
And men aren't often asked this. Women are always asked, well, how do you balance with your children and your spouse? How do you do that?
They come first, period. They know what Pop does. They've known for years. And I think it's funny because when your kids know what you do, they're not impressed.
True.
In any way, shape, or form.
Talking to other people, certainly not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They want to meet. When you meet somebody, oh, let me meet them. You're like, you know, I do the same thing. Yeah. Your dad. We don't care about you. I remember telling my kids, I was like, I'm on TV. They're like, you're always on TV. I was like, that is a horrible thing to say. You're a horrible people. But I got the privilege to be married to a wonderful woman. I've known Dawn since I was 16 years old. And we were best friends until college when we started dating. And she saw me, of all places, fun story, she saw me sing at Disneyland. The show choir went to Disneyland and we were singing. And we started doing a Disney medley. And, you know, we had we didn't have many people out there. There were a couple of parrots out there. But once the Little Mermaid music started and I started singing, all of a sudden, everybody in the hotel room started opening up their windows to see what was happening. And Dawn said, I won't get emotional. Dawn said she saw it, and she said, this boy's got something. And she was the one girl that I could be myself around. And I wasn't trying to be James Monroe Iglehart, the entertainer. I was just James. And I could always be honest with her. And she was a little quirky herself. She was 6'4". She's a tall white girl. And nobody's talking to her. The boys aren't talking to her because she's tall and
Right.
she's a thick girl. So and the folks aren't talking to me because I'm a nerd. And we found each other. And so family has always been important. So I don't make any decision without talking to my wife. I don't make. And what's funny is it's gotten so bad that just imagine my managers, my agents, producers of Broadway shows go, I know you have to talk to your wife first. They already say that. And I also, now my kids are grown and we have a family forum. Hey, there's this thing I should do. What do you guys think? And we've been doing that since they were little. Hey, Pop's thinking about doing this. What do you guys think? Do you guys think I should do this? How do you feel about it? So that the family knows what's going on and that they have a say in what's happening. So if I am gone, it's not just me making a decision and going off and they don't know what's going on. They know. But wherever I go, they come. It's not like I'm there. If I'm there for longer than a week, the kids are coming. So when I'm in DC for a week performing, they're going to be at the show. That wherever I am, that when I'm in Seattle, they're coming. When I'm in Texas, they're coming. Wherever I am, they're coming. And because that's more important. And they know that my family and my cats are more important than anything. I left the show. This is
like, get me in.
This is a funny story. My wife called me one day. I was at Aladdin, and she said our cat was sick. It was literally 15 minutes to places, and my wife was crying. I said, guys, I got to go home. Bye. And they were like, what, your cat? I'm like, she said, the cat is sick. She's crying. She thinks the cat's dying. Put my understudy on. I will see you tonight, hopefully. And I left the matinee and went home to make sure my wife and the cat was okay. And we went to the vet, took care of everything, and the vet was able to take care of everything, and I was able to get back on the train and go back to work for that night show. But if my family calls, they are the most important. I have learned over the years that this thing called fame or entertainment is a job. It is a job. And this fame thing really is not real. And it's been a long time learning that. But just because folks love you and everything, the realness, what's real is your family and the folks that are close to you that really know who you are, not the guy on stage. And so that's very important to me. So that always comes first about everything.
That's really great. Hey guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriette Cole. We are speaking with James Monroe Iglehart, just talking about everything. And I love that we're talking about everything. We just have a couple of minutes left, but I want to go a little deeper. So the very first book that I wrote is Jumping the Broom, the African-American Wedding Planner. It's all about planning a wedding and celebrating our heritage. And I'm remaking it 30 plus years later.
Right. Congratulations.
So, thank you. And so I'm curious for you. You met your wife when you were 16. I mean, you were children.
Yeah.
What do you do in the tough times? Because if you've been married for a long time, you know there are tough times. There are times when you go, oh, I don't know if. What have you two done to be able to stay together and have the sweetness that we hear as you're talking?
As of January 12th, 2025, we've been married 23 years.
Beautiful.
And we laugh a lot. We laugh because we know that if we can laugh during the bad times, when we tell the story later, we will look at the laughter part of it, not the terrible part of it. Mm-hmm. And we have to be, I know this sounds cliche, but we have to be honest with each other and tell each other what's really going on, even if it's hard, and be able to deal with it and be able to get mad and it'd be okay. Be able to argue and it'd be okay. And be able to say, we agree to disagree, or one of us has to make a true decision and we're going to trust that we're going to go with that. We also have to realize that love is a verb and not just a line. Love is something you do. Love is something that you truly do. It is not, oh, I love you, I'm in love with you, because the feeling goes away. You know, you don't always feel in love with the person. I mean, you love them, but you don't always feel. There's that moment when you first meet somebody, and oh my God, whoa, the girl, you know, I just want to be with you all the time. And then sometimes you're just like, whoo, we still here. But you know, but love is something that you do. So when you do things that you don't want to do because they want to do it, you make decisions because this is what they, and sometimes, and it's never 50-50. Sometimes it's 60-40. Sometimes it's 70-30. Sometimes it's 80-20. Sometimes you're there just to lift that person up because they need it. And then all of a sudden they turn around where they have to lift you up because you need it. What keeps us together is just laughing together, being honest together, and knowing that it's something that you work at every day. I make a decision. I want to work for this person because they're here with me. They're the one. And I can look and other people are cute and pretty, but this is the one that's been with me the whole time. And there's something crazy about it. She's still fine to me. I tell her she's sexy all the time, and she is. And my kids laugh at us. And she's like, can y'all stop? Oh, God. And I'm like, no, it's the same chick I met in high school. She was fine then. She's fine now. So if she walks past my head on the butt, there's nothing I can do about that. She shouldn't wear sweats like that in the house. That's my problem. Okay. So that's how we really, also, we don't listen to anyone else but each other. So when other people try, you know, hey man, you should do this, my boys, I'm like, you ain't in my relationship. I can't listen to you. I got to listen to her. Because if it makes her happy, then we're okay. So.
Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for all of your great work and for your performance in this beautiful show. It is on Broadway now at Studio 54. Enjoy. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And thank all of you for tuning in. I told you this was going to be a good one. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.